The Electoral College sucks. Since 1992, 32 years ago, Republicans have only won the popular vote once, and that was George W. Bush's second term following 9/11. Yet the Republicans won the presidency 3 out of the last 8 times. That is deeply disturbing. But imagine this world. This just in, given the influx of Californians to Texas thanks in large part to a certain South African billionaire redomiciling all of his tech companies in the Lone Star State, Texas has now flipped blue. Now all 40 of Texas's Electoral College votes will go to the Democratic candidate and Republicans will never win the presidency again. So I guess we all love the Electoral College now, right? Actually, no. Everyone still hates it here. This is super bad too, from the standpoint of democracy. And that's because the Electoral College is a terrible institution that was used to entrench slavery, kill Reconstruction, and deny the American people the right to pick their leaders. And on top of that, it deeply distorts the election, even when it benefits your favorite team. Now, getting rid of the Electoral College completely would require a constitutional amendment. But in the last 200 years, there have been more than 700 attempts at fixing the Electoral College. In fact, more proposals for constitutional amendments than any other subject. So if the Electoral College is so despised, why is it still here? Well, today we're going to tackle your burning questions about the Electoral College, what it is, why it exists, and what we can do to fix this terrible, terrible institution. Now, when Americans vote in the presidential election, they are technically not voting directly for president. Instead, they are voting for a slate of electors pledged to vote for their chosen candidate. Each state is allocated a certain number of electorals based on its representation in Congress, which equals the number of senators plus the number of representatives in the House. Washington, D.C. is also allocated 3 electors under the 23rd Amendment, and this brings the total number of electors to 538. A candidate needs a majority of 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. In 48 states and the District of Columbia, the candidate who wins the majority of the popular vote in that state wins all of that state's electoral votes. This is a winner-take-all system. Maine and Nebraska use a different method where 1 electoral vote is awarded to the winner of the popular vote in each congressional district. The 2 remaining votes go to the statewide winner. This is called the congressional district method. But why does this weirdly anachronistic system exist? Well, in school they probably taught you that the Electoral College would protect smaller states, but actually it was just another compromise caused by slavery. By this time of the Constitutional Convention, delegates had already agreed to the 3/5 compromise, which counted 5 slaves as equal to 3 free people in order to increase the South's representation in Congress, as compared to getting no representation based on the people that those states enslaved. The compromise allowed slave states to count 60% of their enslaved population, boosting their representation in Congress and their influence in the presidential elections through the Electoral College. James Madison preferred popular elections, but he had to find a compromise. He said that although the people were the fittest to choose the president, the, quote, right of suffrage was much more diffusive in the northern than the southern states, and the southern states, quote, could have no influence in the election on the score of the Negroes. And thus the Electoral College was designed to placate the slave states. Now, it would have been nice if this politically expedient compromise hadn't outlasted slavery itself. However, the Electoral College's worst moment has yet to come. The election of 1876 was a mess in ways that should sound familiar. 4 states sent 2 rival slates of Democratic and Republican electors to Congress, and the Democrat Samuel Tilden won the popular vote but was 1 vote shy in the Electoral College. A panel of legislators and Supreme Court justices awarded the disputed electors to Republican Rutherford B. Hayes. Democrats initially refused to go along with the plan, then Hayes offered a compromise. He agreed to withdraw Northern troops who were stationed in the South to protect black voters if Democrats dropped their opposition. Democrats agreed and Hayes was inaugurated. And at this point there were hundreds of black men serving in Congress, state legislatures, and local offices all across the South, but this compromise effectively ended Reconstruction, ushering in decades of segregation and voter suppression. So yeah, have no doubt, the Electoral College is one of the last institutional pillars of slavery. Now, when you look at how the Electoral College works today, there are some obvious weaknesses. Let's start with the electors. After the popular vote, the winning slate of electors in each state convenes in December to cast their official votes for president and vice president. Electors are usually people who have been active in the state political party, and the electors send their votes to Congress, where the results are officially counted in early January. Electors are generally expected to vote according to the results of their state's popular vote. However, some electors have historically been what are known as faithless electors, meaning they did not vote as pledged. Some states have passed laws to prevent this, and in 2020, the Supreme Court ruled that states can require electors to follow the will of voters and enforce penalties on faithless electors. And of course, certain law school professors have advocated for faithless electors to follow the popular vote and screw Trump out of another Trump presidency. But what happens if a state doesn't have a law penalizing faithless electors? Well, we don't really know. Although a majority of states penalize faithless electors, Pennsylvania does not. And here's an unfun fact about the 2024 election. 1/3 of Republican electors in battleground states participated in Trump's fake elector scheme in 2020. Now, I'm guessing that might pose a few problems, but I don't know, I'm not James Madison. Now, the problems don't stop there. The newly elected Congress meets in a joint session in early January to count the electoral votes and officially declare the winner. This used to be pretty uneventful, but in 2024, we'll all be holding our breath to see if Congress remembers how to count, and whether there's another violent insurrection. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has already said he's not sure if Republicans will be voting for the person who receives the most electoral votes if that person's name is Kamala Harris. And speaking of Kamala Harris, the vice president, in their role as the president of the Senate, presides over the session. Every reputable legal scholar who has not sold their soul to the devil agrees that the vice president has no authority to change the outcome of the election by rejecting electors. But in 2021, Donald Trump and the Republican Party asserted that Mike Pence should have had the courage to make Trump president again. And in the interim, Congress has since addressed some of the weaknesses of the law regarding the Electoral College. In 2022, Congress passed the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act, which clarifies that the vice president's role during the certification of electoral votes is strictly ceremonial. The act also changed the threshold for objections. Previously, only one senator and one representative were required to object to a state's electoral results. The new law increases this threshold to 1/5 of both the Senate and the House, making it harder but not impossible for frivolous objections to delay or disrupt the process. The law also includes provisions to prevent states from submitting multiple slates of electors. It mandates that each state must resolve any disputes over electors before submitting its official slate to Congress. But of course, there are still loopholes that bad faith actors can exploit. The act provides that in most circumstances, the governor of a state, rather than a local elections board, must certify the slate of electors. That minimizes some of the risk of malarkey, but as lawyer Neil Katyal points out, a governor could still certify a fake slate of electors. Quote, if a governor certifies a fake slate, that will be hard for Congress to fix. And some Republicans are already arguing that the act is unconstitutional. Anyway, if a candidate receives a majority of 270 electoral votes, they are declared the winner. If no candidate reaches 270 votes, the election is decided by the House of Representatives, where each state delegation gets one vote to choose the president. If neither candidate gets to 270, then the outcome depends on who wins a very gerrymandered House of Representatives. And this might be the best argument for dumping the Electoral College altogether, or at least watching that one episode of Veep. Now, obviously, if you're trying to amend the Constitution, you'll want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, let my law firm, the Eagle Team, help. If you've suffered a data breach, especially if you got one of those data breach letters saying that your social security had been leaked, were involved in a car crash, or dealt with sexual harassment from the Trump campaign or anybody else, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. It's so important to talk to a lawyer right away so you can get the best representation, maximize your recovery, and find out what your options are. So just click on the link in the description or call the phone number that's on screen for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle Team, so click below. But just think about how much simpler and boring it would be to just give the presidency to the person who wins the most votes. I mean, it would all be over in less than a month after Election Day. Talk about a snooze fest. Aren't we supposed to be having fun, America? But yeah, the good old US of A is the only country in the world which uses the Electoral College system. And I bet we get much bigger ratings because of it. TV ratings being, of course, the most important thing here. So if we want to be a basic, boring, democratic republic, we probably have two choices. Elect the president through popular vote or reform the Electoral College. Now, the first reform proposal would abolish the Electoral College and implement a single nationwide popular vote count. The candidate to receive the most votes would win, although some proposals include additional requirements. For example, the winner would be crowned only if they meet a minimum threshold, usually 40% of the vote. If the winner needs a plurality of the vote and no candidate reaches this threshold, a second election would be held between the top two candidates. Or if you want more punishment, you could have Congress select the winner in a joint session. Now, proponents of a direct popular election argue that it offers the simplest, most democratic process for selecting the president. In this system, every voter's choice would equally contribute to the election outcome. And all votes of the people would count the same, preventing any one state from being disproportionately advantaged or disadvantaged. But of course, there are some problems with direct election. Larger states where more people live, like Texas and California, would have more voting power. Critics say this would hurt states with lots of land but little population, like the two Dakotas. And under a popular vote model, the candidates might spend all of their time in the 6 most populous states instead of spending their time in the 6 swingiest states. But of course, it's kind of inchoate to think about states at all when you're talking about the one national election that we have in this country. State borders themselves are arbitrary and irrelevant when you're talking about the person who's the president of the entire country. But in any event, it's definitely the case that this kind of direct election model would absolutely require a constitutional amendment. But you might have heard of something called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. This is an agreement among several states and the District of Columbia to allocate their electoral votes to the presidential candidate who wins the national popular vote, regardless of the outcome in the individual states. Now, this compact only takes effect when enough states have joined to total 270 electoral votes, the minimum needed to win the presidency. The idea is to ensure that the winner of the national popular vote becomes president, bypassing the current electoral college system without needing a constitutional amendment. Now, supporters of the Popular Vote Compact say that states have the authority to change the rules for electing the president because of Article 2, Section 1, which gives states the rights to appoint presidential electors, quote, in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct. But if the National Popular Vote Compact is a true interstate compact, then it may violate the Compact Clause, which provides the, quote, no state shall, without consent of Congress, enter into any agreement or compact with another state. In other words, the compact might require congressional assent. But still, it would be way easier to get congressional consent rather than getting a constitutional amendment. But Article 2 of the Constitution may also be a barrier to reform through the Popular Vote Compact because it provides that the election of the president should occur indirectly through the election of the Electoral College. Can the states simply opt out of the indirect election, which is effectuated through the Electoral College? Well, the best argument would be that Article 2, Section 1 provides the states with the power to appoint, in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct, the electors who represent the state in the Electoral College. Facially, the Constitution's primary limitation on the power of a state to select its electors is the final number of electors awarded to each state. So if you take that viewpoint, as long as enough states have joined to equal the total of 270 electoral votes, then the plan is constitutional. And there are some Supreme Court cases which would support this reading. However, in 2023, the Supreme Court decided a case called Harper versus Moore, which shot down the independent state legislature theory. This radical interpretation of the Constitution would have given state legislatures almost total authority to regulate federal elections without interference of state courts or state constitutions. Before the ruling, it was theoretically possible that state legislatures could override the state constitutions when setting presidential election rules, including voter eligibility. However, after Moore, it's clear that states cannot ignore their constitutions when determining election results. And many state constitutions have specific restrictions on voter eligibility. And if even one state constitution forbids the state legislature from altering the voting base in presidential elections, the compact might not be able to take effect in that state, and it might then drop the total below whatever threshold would be required for it to take effect. Which is not to say that the National Vote Compact would definitely not work as currently conceived, but it is to say that to be perfectly certain, you would still need a constitutional amendment. And that certainly has happened. In 2021, after the Capitol riots, Democratic Congressman Steve Cohen of Memphis proposed an amendment to elect the president by popular vote. It would have made the following changes to the system, quote, provide for direct election of the president and vice president by the people, define voters as electors of the most populous branch of the state legislature in each state, empower Congress to set uniform age qualifications, formalize the joint candidacy of president and vice president on the same ticket, declare the candidates winning the greatest number of votes to be elected, authorize Congress to provide for the times, place, and manner of holding such elections and entitlement to inclusion on the ballot, and authorize Congress to provide by law for the case of death of a candidate or candidate's departure from the ticket. But the resolution made so much sense that it died in committee. But there are also reform proposals that keep the Electoral College, but modify it to address some of the problem areas. The first reform would be forcing all 50 states to adopt either the district plan used by Maine and Nebraska. The second reform would be to mandate all 50 states use the winner-take-all plan used by 48 states. The third plan would be a system that would award electoral votes in direct proportion to the percentage of votes gained by the competing candidate in each state. That would address some of the iniquities of the current system. In winner-take-all states, it doesn't matter how close the popular vote is, the person who wins gets all the electors. And critics say that this disenfranchises voters who choose the losing candidates. If the US switched to a proportional plan, electoral votes would be awarded based on the proportion of the popular vote each candidate receives within the state. And the argument goes that retaining the Electoral College would be closer to the founders' original vision for the US as a democratic republic. In a republic, the states have a legitimate role in many areas of governance, including the presidential election, and the reform approach would not completely dilute the voting power of smaller states. But in 2009, the Congressional Research Service surveyed the popular vote model and the reform proposals and concluded that without the Electoral College acting as a filter, the political system could fragment. Popular election, quote, would foster acrimonious and protracted post-election struggles rather than eliminate them. For instance, as the presidential election of 2000 demonstrated, close results in a single state in a close election are likely to be bitterly contested. Under direct election, those favoring the Electoral College argue every close election might resemble the post-election contests in 2000, not just in one state but nationwide, as both parties seek to gain every possible vote. Such rancorous disputes could have profound negative effects on the political comedy in the nation, and in the worst case might undermine the stability and legitimacy of the federal government. Well, that kind of made sense in 2009, but honestly, it's kind of funny how naive that congressional report is in this day and age. Proponents of keeping the Electoral College did not foresee what would happen over the next decade. The Electoral College did absolutely nothing to stop the rancorous disputes, nor did it do anything to discourage protracted legal battles. On the contrary, it flamed them. Right now, the United States is so politically polarized that the government is arguably already unstable. And the election hasn't even happened yet, and there are already over 125 lawsuits pending, in part because the vote in the 6 to 7 key swing states matter way more than anything else. So political advertising and lawfare is extremely important in those states alone, and basically nowhere else. In a world where the Electoral College didn't exist, there would be little incentive to spend so much money and effort on the marginal votes in these arbitrary states, because the national vote is rarely close. And even if it is, so what? Great, then there were roughly equal votes on either side, and it's not going to be distorted by the electoral vote of some random state. Of course, if your preferred presidential candidate doesn't win this year, you may want to flee the country. And if you do, you'll probably still want to get cellular data at a great price while abroad, which you can do with today's sponsor, Saley. Saley is the incredible new eSIM service app from Nord Security. If you've ever been lost abroad or badly in need of an internet connection with no Wi-Fi spot in sight, you'll understand what a difference a local SIM card can make. And an eSIM provider is an internet connection wherever you travel and saves you money on roaming fees. Saley lets you choose from multiple affordable eSIM plans in over 150 countries, and you can get tons of data and never have to worry that your tourist photos are uploaded in the background and ate up all your data. Not that that has ever happened to me. Ugh. Now, I recently traveled to Japan, as you may know if you watched my reaction to Ace Attorney with a real Japanese lawyer. I was in Japan for 2 weeks, and getting an eSIM was one of the best decisions I ever made. If you've ever tried to use the Tokyo subway without Google Maps, you know how important it is to have a good internet service. And while all my friends were dealing with roaming fees and having their cellular data throttled, I could still navigate and plan daily activities with ease on the fly. I could even use my phone as a hotspot, and because I knew I'd purchased a whole bunch of data, I could upload photos and videos with abandon. Plus, with the Saley app, getting an eSIM couldn't be simpler. You just buy a plan and activate it, all on the Saley app or website. And once you've got it activated, you're good to use the internet wherever you go without needing to pop into a cafe and pray that they have Wi-Fi. And all Saley eSIM plans are compatible with iOS and Android devices. And an eSIM with Saley offers a lot of competitive advantages as well. There's no need to wait in line at the airport to get a local SIM, and an eSIM can be installed only once, limiting the need for users to install a new eSIM for every country. So you're covered no matter where your bohemian backpacking trip takes you. So click on the link that's on screen right now or down below, or use the code LegalEagle to get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. A Saley eSIM really is a traveler's best friend, and it's the best decision you can make before going to another country. So click on the link below to get 15% off. And after that, click on this link over here for more LegalEagle, or I'll see you in court.